This is a review on the modifications that I've done on my Crosman 1377. Now, I usually don't make reviews online, but when I was looking to modify my 1377, I actually did a lot of Google searches and a lot of YouTube searches to see what's already being done out there. And I figured by reviewing my own, it adds the material for other people who wants to modify their 1377s or 1322s in the future. Now, I got into purchasing the 1377 because I got into firearms first by buying replica BB guns, and I set up a range downstairs in my basement, and I do practice down there quite a bit. And from shooting replica BBs, I got heavily into airsoft and then into real firearms. Now, the problem with the replica BBs, though, as much fun as they are, if I wanted to shoot, I'd have to go through a whole cartridge of CO2. So even when I wanted to take a few shots, I'd actually be down in my basement for a while, as I use up a whole cartridge. The good thing with the Crosman 1377, as it is a pneumatic pump, if I don't want to take 3 or 4 shots, then I can just take 3 or 4 shots and don't have to spend the afternoon down there. Also, when I got into modifying the Crosman 1377, or when I found that it can be modified, I started doing a lot of research on it, and I found there's a whole lot being done online from people making custom parts, milling metals, and custom wood parts as well. So there's a lot you could do to the 1377. All my modifications are using aftermarket parts, so they're fairly simple, but still with aftermarket parts there's a lot of different things that you can do. So I took mine from a pistol to a full-size rifle, and I'll show you exactly what I did. Here's my pistol. I'm not going to do a review on it because there's plenty of reviews of the 1377 online already, but I'm going to direct you to 2 reviews in particular. One is from Michael K. from Replica Airguns.com. He has an online store that sells out of BC, and he sells to the United States and to Canada. He deals in replica BB guns, pellet guns, and airsoft guns, and he's a pleasure to deal with. The second review is from PyramidAir.com, and they're an American company, and they do reviews on a whole bunch of different air guns. Now, every time I do upgrades on any of my guns, may it be a pellet gun, airsoft gun, I always like to make a chart of the modifications I would like to do, their sources that I got them from, as well as their prices. And here's a chart of what I've done to the 1377. I bought my pistol in Oakville at the Outdoor Surplus Exchange. It's an outdoor military surplus store, and they had it used for $49.99. I had my eye on the 1377 for a while, but it's been on retail in my local Canadian Tire for $89.99, so I knew I had to get it right away. And that's the first item you see on the modification charts that I had. For my first round of modifications, I got my parts from airgunsource.com, and they're an online store from Peterborough, Ontario. I started with a Crosman custom stock, which effectively turns your pistol into a carbine, the Crosman 4x10 silver scope, as well as a Crosman steel breech kit. Now, I got the scope because I knew I wanted to buy an extended barrel and polished chrome, and I wanted a scope that would match, so this silver scope did quite well. It is a lower end scope that I was actually on the website's discontinued items, but it does what I need to do. For my second round of modifications, I got my parts from scopesandammo.com, and this is a website that deals out of Perth, Ontario, and they were a great pleasure to deal with. I started with the 24-inch barrel, the brass muzzle brake with the pin, and the brass end plug for the steel breech. And as part of the cosmetic modifications that you can see at the bottom of the chart, I polished off the 24-inch barrel to chrome using a Dremel tool and fine sandpaper, and then I also polished the stock trigger to chrome to match the barrel as well as the scope. For my third round of modifications, I got my parts both from eBay and from scopesandammo.com. I started off with the SKS cheek rest. Now, this is a cheek rest from the actual SKS tactical version. And then I got the forearm pump handle from the Backpackers edition of the 1322, and I ended off with the extended probe and nickel-plated bolt to match the chromed extended barrel, as well as to give a better handle on the bolt, as the original bolt is quite small. So this concludes all the modifications that I did to my 1377. All the prices on the list are before taxes and without shipping, with the exception to the SKS cheek rest, because that shipped from the States, so there were some extra shipping and handling prices that I had to deal with. So the total came up to $296.60. But if we were to include all the taxes and the shipping and handling for all the items, this was easily a $350 gun. So from a $49.99 pistol, I now have a around $350 rifle. The prices I paid were pretty decent compared to other things you've seen out there. You could easily turn this into a much more expensive rifle or expensive pistol. But regardless, it was a pleasure to modify. Some forums that I found online called the 1377 the crack cocaine of pistol modifications for pellet shooters, which is definitely the case because you could easily take this from the modifications to wide it to other things that you'll see online, which is pretty impressive. Now to commence a walk around of the rifle, we'll begin from the rear where you could see the brass end cap for the steel breech. And as you move to the side of the rifle, you could see the close-up of the steel breech itself. Now the mounting system for optics on the steel breech is made for dovetail scope mounts. The scope that I bought came with Picatinny rail mounts, but luckily it was small enough that the clamps on the scope mounts fit into the grooves of my steel breech. As well as you could see a close-up of the extended nickel-plated bolts as attached to the extended probe. Moving to the front of the rifle, you could see the pump handle from the Backpackers edition of the 1322, as well as you could see the polished trigger to match the barrel. To the rear of the rifle, you could see the custom stock, as well as the SKS cheek rest, and then in the front you have the 24-inch barrel attached to the muzzle brake at the end with the pin. Now the pin on the muzzle brake is for the forward sighting. When you don't have optics, which actually sits quite high, so you'll have to make sure you adjust your rear sights to accommodate that. Measurements for the original 1377 pistol is only 34 centimeters or 13.5 inches. With my full modifications turning into rifle size, it currently measures 104 centimeters or 41 inches from buttstock to muzzle brake. For accuracy testing, these are the targets that I shoot at. In my gun range, I set up a small pellet trap and I set these inside. When I first started shooting my Crosman 1377, I started with Premier Crosman hollow points. And then from there, I purchased some Daisy Precision Max pellets. They were pointed pellets. And from thereafter, I bought Crosman hunting pellets. They were a pointed pellet as well. When I started shooting my 1377 in pistol form, I started off with Premier hollow points. They shot fairly well as a pistol, but after I modified it to the rifle, I started having a lot of flyers. I ended up thinking that I damaged my barrel when I was polishing it, because the shots were very inconsistent and I would have many flyers in my groupings. The grouping you see in front of you, we have 4 in a tight group and 1 flyer, which is actually pretty decent for what I usually get with my 1377. So it's pretty evident that with the extended barrel, my gun in particular does not like hollow points. Afterwards, I started shooting with Daisy Precision Max pellets. These are a pointed pellet that I purchased from my local TSC store. When I first opened the tin, I was actually very disappointed, not impressed at all, because many of the pellets themselves were damaged. Many of the skirts were bent, or some of the pellet heads were bent as well. So I ended up discarding a whole bunch of these pellets. I actually didn't start shooting these pellets for about a month after I purchased the tin. But when I started shooting with these finally, I actually noticed a huge improvement in the accuracy, and so I had a feeling then, well, maybe my barrel was not damaged. The groups were always very tight. You see here, you see 4 groups in the bowl, and 1 high at 12 o'clock. Now, I don't believe that 12 o'clock shot was a flyer. I think that could have been me. I maybe pulled the trigger too hard. But usually, the 4 in the bowl is the type of grouping that you would get with these pellets. Lastly, I purchased Crosman hunting pellets. These are also a pointed pellet as well. These performed just as well as the Daisies. As you see here, we have 5 shots directly in the bull with a fairly tight grouping. All the shots that I am doing are at 18 feet from the targets. And I was very happy with these, so it's pretty evident to say that my 1377 with the extended rifle It prefers pointed pellets. I don't think I would buy any flathead wad cutters or anything like that. I'm done with hollow points as well. From this point on, I will only be shooting pointed pellets out of my rifle. Here's a final view of my 1377 rifle. As for future modifications, there is one final modification that I may do, which involves cutting down the one of the trigger sear's springs to give it a lighter trigger pull. There's also a modification where you could put a empty brass shell of a 22 on that spring to work as a spring guide. I found pretty interesting. I might also switch out the optics. The small objective lens doesn't lend to a lot of light entering the viewfinder, so you don't see too brightly. So I might potentially get a larger scope. Now, I don't care to put a high-end scope on this at all because I will not be using this for hunting. I was recently at a friend's property where we're shooting some of my real firearms as well as this, and this rifle I took as far as 20 yards and I was still able to shoot accurately at targets about an inch to 2 inches across. So I don't think I would ever take this gun beyond 2 yards. Again, it was a great pleasure to modify, and I hope anyone else doing modifications out there finds this video useful. All the websites mentioned in this review will be found in the descriptions below.